Hello and welcome to our channel. It's difficult to fathom a time before shoes were invented. What began as a utilitarian venture has evolved into a diverse, thriving sector that is equally concerned with aesthetics and functionality. Though all shoes have the same basic features, their coloring, materials, and styles have changed dramatically over the intriguing history of footwear. Experts believe that shoes were invented roughly 40,000 years ago, based on archaeological and paleoarchaeological evidence. They looked at the skeletons of people from the Middle and Upper Paleolithic periods, focusing on the little toes, which seemed to have gotten weaker and weaker throughout time. The contour of the foot had shifted as well. The historians concluded that these modifications were most likely due to the tightness of the footwear, which prevented the foot from lengthening over time. History teaches us that shoe development was distinct in every corner of the world due to the varying climate situations and hierarchical structure. In ancient Egypt, people had to protect their feet from scorching sand rather than the cold. Hence, the people prioritized soles made of papyrus or palm leaf shoes. These were manufactured in the same way for both left and right feet and were secured with leather laces around the foot. It is important to note that from this point on in history, distinction began in regards to socioeconomic status. Clothing and footwear were one manner of self-expression for wealthy people who wanted to stand out from the crowd and show that they belonged to a higher class. And as a result, the rich ancient Egyptians began adorning their shoes with various patterns and precious stones. Unlike Egypt, footwear in the Kingdom of Israel was relatively advanced and of great quality. Even in the olden times, the people there were using leather, wool, and wood to make their shoes, and wealthy townspeople flaunted their extravagance by wearing more than one footwear, including boots and shoes, as well as sandals and half boots. When one thinks of ancient Greece, the knee-high lace-up sandals worn by Hermes, a deity of Olympus, are perhaps the first thing that come to mind. Although the actual revolutionaries in footwear creation at the time were heteras, women who could join men's gatherings. They were the ones who ordered shoes to be made with separate imprints for the left and right foot that would create a follow-me mark in the sand. Besides this, platform shoes also originated in Greece, which were needed by actors during plays to make them taller and more noticeable to the audience. In terms of class differences, Greece was no different than other parts of the world, and footwear was also used to identify social standing, with different shaped shoes worn by different social classes. Unlike the Greeks, who merely used shoes as an adornment, the Roman footwear served both a pragmatic and a social purpose, and each social class wore footwear that corresponded to their social rank. Both patricians and plebeians wore shoes which only had the sole covered and strings were used to keep them attached to their feet. The nobility's sandals, on the other hand, were knotted with 4 laces, whereas the plebeian sandals had just one. Besides them, the soldiers wore nailed half boots, while actresses wore rope fiber slip-on shoes. In medieval Europe, footwear was extremely ostentatious. The upper class despised open shoes, and thus they opted for closed shoes with long, upturned toes. A bell was frequently fastened to the top of a shoe, as was the trend at the time, and the length of a shoe's tip was a means to indicate a person's social rank. By the 16th century, however, heels slowly began to become a part of European culture. They were brought to Europe by Persian tradesmen, where they were actually worn by soldiers to help them shoot their bow and arrow with ease. While European male nobles may not have been firing a bow and arrow, they did recognize that wearing high heels would keep their feet free of horse feces and other filth found on the grounds of a Renaissance city. Hence, the heels appealed to them. Courtesans in 16th century Italy were quick to adopt this high heels culture, as they were expected to please men and mostly interacted with them. Their heels, called chopines, were exceptionally high, sometimes being 10 inches tall, and they would wear them accompanied by a man whose mere role was to keep them from falling. A lot of the time, a group of 4 or 5 powerful noblemen also used to engage in this role. Shoes in most parts of the world have been tied to the feet with various laces since the dawn of time. It wasn't until 1790 that English inventor Harvey Kennedy attached the tips of the shoelaces with metal clips that he named aiglettes. These clips, which were originally made of metal but are now mostly made of plastic, prevent textile shoelaces from withering away and make inserting them into the holes easier. Then, the 1800s arrived and women's and men's shoes finally started to differ in terms of style, color, size of heel, and toe shape. During this time, cloth-top shoes and boots became extremely popular. And finally, the standard for a man's heel was settled at 1 inch after much hesitation. Back then, shoes were made straight, with no distinction between a left and a right shoe. That made walking difficult. However, the arrival of the 20th century marked the manufacturing of foot-specific shoes, making shoes more comfortable and easier to walk in. New thermoplastic rubbers and other synthetic materials also came into being during the era, which resulted in considerable cost reductions in the production of footwear. Moreover, gluing took the place of sewing, thereby increasing the number of people who could afford buying shoes on a more regular basis. The technological advances also impacted the look of the footwear due to the development process becoming easier and cheaper. Then, the Great Depression hit and styles of footwear became less extravagant than before. Somber colors like black and brown shoes started to dominate the American market. Although, even in the midst of tremendous financial difficulties, being trendy was still considered significant, and as a result, Oxfords became fashionable among men, while cork-soled platform shoes became popular among women. The following World War II brought little change to men's footwear, with Oxfords and slip-ons still being the popular choice. However, women's shoes went through yet another major transformation. They became more arched, elegant, with thinner heels to draw more attention to the foot. Heels remained fashionable during the end of the 20th century, and as an increasing number of women became employed, the more comfortable form, platform shoes were seen everywhere. Nowadays, there is a shoe for every occasion to suit each person's mood and personality. Footwear is no longer considered merely an attire, but also a kind of art, and modern-day shoe manufacturers make a sincere effort to balance comfort along with aesthetics, using the latest technology and experimenting in the lab with scientists. Not only this, but there are a number of types, ranging from boots, sneakers, sandals, flip-flops, flats, heels, and whatnot. There are distinct shoes for men, women, and children, and specific shoes are made for specific purposes, such as the sports, dancing, medicated, and hiking shoes differ from each other. In terms of material, leather has always been a staple, but it is now gradually replaced with rubber and plastic. Today, the footwear market has evolved into a billion-dollar industry. Majority of the shoes are manufactured in China, India, and Vietnam. Meanwhile, Italy can lay claim to being the European footwear manufacturing center, exporting about 200 million pairs of shoes around the world. All in all, shoes are one of the most important articles of apparel that contribute to a person's sense of style because they are both functional and fashionable. The evolution of shoes, like many other things, is intricately related to the evolution of humans. For a long time, footwear has meant a lot more than just its basic function, with political and social shifts, as well as technological advancements, all playing key roles in influencing footwear trends.